Okay, so today I'm going to show you how to put the side pockets in this sweatshirt. And I've never done exactly this style, so there may be a better way to do this, but I'm going to show you how I did it, and I think it turned out pretty good. So I'll show you my method to the madness. All right, so you'll want to lay your pockets on your sweatshirt front. We'll start with the front, lining up the sides and the bottom. And then I'm gonna go ahead and place a pin 1 inch from the top and 1 inch from the bottom. And that will be our marking where we're going to sew this pocket. And I'm putting a couple other pins just to stabilize. But so to begin, you're going to sew a 1/2 inch in on 1/2 inch seam allowance with a stretch stitch, not a serger. So I'm going to use a very narrow zigzag along here, and then we'll come back and do the next step. All right, so you can see with my thread that I've stitched about a 1/2 inch in from the edge on the side pocket. So the next thing we're going to do is remove the pins, and we're going to clip in to the seam that we just sewed, okay? And then you're going to open your pocket and place a pin marking the end of the stitching. We are going to understitch the pocket between those two markings. So you don't want to extend past where you sewed before, but you want to come pretty close to the edge of it. So we are going to stitch now here with the same knit stitch or stretch stitch so that it's still a stretchy pocket between these spots, catching the seam allowance on the back of the sweatshirt and the pocket. So I'm actually stitching through 3 layers. 2 layers of the pocket because it's folded, and 1 layer of the sweatshirt for the on the front. Okay, so we're just going to stitch very close to the edge all along there to understitch the pocket. Okay, so we now have our pocket understitched, which means when we fold it to the back, which is where it will be, it's actually going to lay really nicely because of that stitching along the edge. So what we want to do now is fold it back, and then because we notched it, we are able to pull out these seam allowances here for the side of the sweatshirt. So I'm just going to pull out the top and the bottom, and again this is about the top inch of the pocket. Pull this out and pin it because this is what we'll use to sew into the side seam. All right, now we're going to do one last step at this point, and then we will wait until we're sewing the rest of it to finish the pocket. But what I'm going to do now is in these corners, because we notched and cut the fabric, we want to make sure that it doesn't rip open, especially as this pocket gets wear and tear. So I'm going to take a very narrow zigzag and just zigzag right in the corners of the top and bottom of the pocket just to secure that fabric and make sure that it's reinforced. Okay, so now you should be able to see my narrow little zigzag reinforcement right there, and it's actually also on the other side as well. And I chose a light gray thread to top stitch. You have to, when you're using stripes, you have to choose one of the colors. So I chose a light gray. So we have the top stitching right here in the light gray and the top stitching here in the light gray, which of course you can see less. And so now our front of our pocket is ready to be sewn into the side seam. Repeat with both sides, and then let's do the back. Okay, here we are on the back of the sweatshirt, and this side is a lot easier. It gets a little tricky when we get to the side seam, but for the pocket prep, we are simply aligning the sides and the bottoms of the pockets, and then with right sides together, I'm going to just baste again with a knit stitch. So you can use your, I will just be using my serger to attach the pockets to the sides. And then on the bottoms, I won't be sewing yet, but I will simply just be pinning to make sure that it stays in place. So go ahead and baste the sides with a knit stitch or your serger, and then we'll be ready to sew the sides together. Okay, so now we get to the part where I really don't know if this is the best method, but it looks okay, and It's pretty easy to sew. So we have our sleeves attached and we are sewing up the side seam. I went ahead and already attached the cuff, but you could also be using the cuff method in the round and not have a cuff on here. But pin or attach or clip your side seam. I'm being careful to match my stripes here since I'm using striped fabric. And stop before you get to the pocket openings. Now you want to make sure, since we sewed right sides together, that at this point you open both pockets to the wrong side. So this is the back pocket opened up, and this front one we already turned to the back side because we did the understitching and the little zigzag reinforcement. So this is where you are going to do something a little bit different. So we've opened up our seam allowance here. We have our side seam matched. And you're going to use your serger, if you have one, and serge all the way along the side seam until you get to the top of the pocket. And at that point, you're going to switch over to your other sewing machine because we're simply going to attach the top of the pocket and the bottom of the pocket by a zigzag stitch here, because you can see I'm simply taking the front of the sweatshirt, overlapping it on the back, and then pinning. And we kind of want this corner here to match up with the back side of the pocket, and the same with the bottom. So we have our pocket, we have this open pocket, and we're just overlapping and then pinning, and the corners of the pockets match up. So when we turn this right side out, after we're all done sewing, you're going to see that you might see a little peekaboo of the back pocket, which is why I use the same fabric, but this front pocket that we understitched is completely hidden, and it's a little bit notched out because of the way that we sewed it. So I'll show you again after I sew the side seam, but I just wanted to show you that that is what we're going for, and we want these overlaps to cover that pocket, but also leave that exposed. So go ahead and sew a side seam, or also the side seam, and then I'll show you what it looks like. All right, let's take a look at the completed inseam pocket. So you can see now with the side seam sewn, and I didn't quite get my stripes matched perfectly, but it's just for me. And then here is the pocket. So the back part is the same fabric, and the front I used a lining pocket. There's our understitching right there and our reinforcement stitching right there. So if we look on the inside, we now need to sew the pocket pouch together. So you're simply going to pin or clip and sew the curved and the flat side of the pocket to enclose that pocket completely, and then we will actually be stitching that to the front of the sweatshirt. So we're going to go ahead and first close up the pocket to make sure there's no holes, even though we're going to stitch both these sides again. We'll stitch that up, and then we'll go ahead and attach it to the front of the sweatshirt. Okay, so here is our pocket and on the inside, and so the last step for the pocket is to top stitch it to the front so that it lays nicely. So we're just going to pin the bottom to keep it out of the way, and then what you want to do is smooth the pocket so it lays as flat as possible. So get your fingers in there and smooth down the edge. Oops, I should show you that I did sew the edges together. Okay, and so now just by feel, you are going to pin along the edge, and we don't want to catch the back. We just want to be catching the front of the sweatshirt with our pins, because we're going to top stitch along here. So this would be a great place if you have a cover stitch to use that to top stitch your pocket, and you're just going to follow the curve, and you're going to use your fingers as you sew to feel that edge. I can feel it right now, and then top stitch right along there. So use a zigzag, a knit stitch, a twin needle, or use your cover stitch to top stitch that pocket curve, and then it will lay nicely on the front of your sweatshirt. And repeat with the other side, and then complete your sewing and enjoy your beautiful shirt.